Okay, so today we're going to make buildings. There are two types of buildings. The main building that has most of the lender's focus in, and the back building, which is like for the background. In this video we'll focus on the main building. Before we begin, I've released the first episode of my animated series. It's a dumb series about the default tube. You should watch it after this video, of course. Alright, moving on. So the main building, it'll be more detailed than the back building. The back building has very little modeling to it. So the main building, you look at the difference and then you model it with as much vertices as you want. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it has to be detailed because a lot of focus is going to be onto it. So here, to make it easier for myself, as I see in the building here, the whole building has the same style. So I make the bottom row first. So I extrude the windows, I make the pillars, and then I inset each face, and then I extrude inside, and then that is the windows, you see. So basically it's not a lot of polygons or faces, but it's more than you want in the background buildings. Then afterwards I go to the array modifier, and then I duplicate it a bunch of times, and there we go. Now we have the main building modeled and ready to go. You won't actually have to apply any of these modifiers as long as you don't maybe need to UV unwrap it or something. And the shading of the building is actually very, very easy. The first main building texture is basically, it's just a principal BSDF, and then I color picked the color of the building. And I think in the description I will link the download of GooBlender if you want to follow along properly with this. As you see, these buildings, they have like edge lights on every hard edge. So there is a technique to do it in normal Blender where you put lights at every edge. You're just going to have a lot of lights on one building. That'll be very tedious to just add lights to every window, But in GooBlender, there is a node called the curvature node that highlights all the hard edges. I'll link it in the description below so that you can download it and you can use it for yourself. The principal BSDF has to be plugged into a shader to RGB that is plugged into a mixed RGB. And then the curvature has to be plugged into that mixed RGB through an emission that is also put behind a shader to RGB, and you can change the samples of the edge light. And that is basically our normal building texture. And now we move on to the windows. The windows are very simple as well. So the normal windows, we just select the windows here in the edit mode. See, the handy dandy thing about the array modifier is you don't need to select everything. You can just select the bottom row. And then we move to the shader editor and we make a new texture called windows. And then through the principal BSDF, we plug in a gradient node, a color ramp node, and Control T the gradient node. And you plug this construction into an emission node through an RGB to the color of the BSDF. This emission basically allows you to get the windows to be way more brighter, because otherwise it'll just be dull, So now we change the colors to the ones in the reference. So the dark blue at the bottom and the light blue at the top. Now there's a tricky part here. For some reason, I don't know the main reason, but the edge of this of the gradient is going to be very thin, so it won't be like a very smooth gradient. So what you got to do is you got to either rotate it on the X or Y axis. For me it was the X axis, and it made it way smoother, so the gradient from the bottom to the top, not a hard line as was before. One more thing that you notice in this building's reflection on the windows, you see like buildings reflected on the other side of the road, which obviously we don't want to model what you won't see in the render. So another quick easy way to get out of this is you get a building image or a city image or whatever. I'm using this one here. Then you bring it into Blender as an image node, and then you put the BSDF, you plug it into a mix RGB that is set on color or add, both works, and Control T the image node so that you can move this image across the surface. You do not want the image to be through the UV, otherwise you're going to have to unwrap and do all that stuff. Rather you want it to be on generated. So now you can just move it across the whole building. As you see here, I'm just rotating it and placing it and moving it so that the image is not duplicated across the surface. It's just one big image. And there, now you just play with the slider on the Mix RGB and you get the entire image. See, now there's reflection in the building's windows. Well, you didn't have to do anything. The last thing, the middle windows, as you see here, it's very dark. So what I did is I just duplicated the building texture, made it darker, and there we go. And there we go, that is our main building. The main building, the one that has most focus on it, has a bit more detail than the back buildings, and the texturing is a bit more complicated. That's still simple, you know. But this technique can be used for all the other kind of buildings, you know. Say if you see a complicated building, you model it hard-edged, and then you apply all those different techniques. And don't forget, the first episode of the Default Cube series is out. Give it a watch if you so please. Alright, boy.